The following content is provided under a Creative Commons license. Your support will help MIT OpenCourseware continue to offer high-quality educational resources for free. To make a donation or view additional materials from hundreds of MIT courses, visit MIT OpenCourseware at ocw.mit.edu.
Our next module is called People, the Heart of Lean. And I'm going to start out with you by giving you the two primary messages that I want you to take away from this module. Those of you who've either taken classes with me or written papers with me or made presentations with me know I'm a big fan of this. Putting all the messages up front because I want you to be able to hear how they are confirmed by some of the data I'm going to show you and some of the concepts we're talking about. So the first is that lean can only work if the people who are doing the work really want it to succeed. And we saw that echoed at the New Balance plant tour. We've heard that talked about in many modules during the course of this 3-day class. The second one is that each one of you in this room are very shortly going to be in a position to influence and to motivate people and have the power to actually make a difference. And we want you to pay attention to it for that reason, because it's going to be very important. So there are two distinctive features of a lot of these lean systems. And a lot of time we spend focusing here on the production aspects of just-in-time, but there's also a second system going on that these authors have called the respect for human system. And they define it as a place where workers are allowed to display in full their capabilities through active participation in running and improving their own workshops. So we saw this at the New Balance factory tour, and it was embodied by that 8th waste that they put up on the board. You know, we had shown you 7 in class, and they added 8. The 8th waste was employee creativity. That's something that they did not want to waste, and it speaks very powerfully to how much they have taken to heart and implemented the respect for human system in their plant. As engineers, we spend a lot of time learning about, practicing, doing problem sets about what we think of as the hard stuff, all of the technical knowledge, the engineering science we're trying to learn. But as you have heard from a bunch of practitioners through the course of this class, the hard stuff is not the hard stuff. What's really hard is what they call the soft stuff, things that involve people, things that involve changing culture, changing work practices. So at the end of this module, we want you to be able to explain why people really are the key to improving productivity in organizations, describe how you can be an effective member of a team, and be able to compare and contrast a little bit about leadership and management. We're going to start with a brief active learning exercise. And the question we'd like you to think about is, what are the most important things that contribute to your job satisfaction? So, is that being a student in a class, or maybe you want to think about participating in an internship at a company? Think about the things that really mattered to you, that made you feel like your job was satisfying. I'm going to ask for a brainstorm, and I'm going to ask Hugh to come and be our note taker. Thank you, Hugh. And I want to get a good amount of these up on the board, and then what I'd like to do is you'll take your sticky dots that I handed out earlier, and I'd like you to select your 3 top reasons that are on the board for job satisfaction. Then we're going to be able to look to see where the preponderance is in the room. All right, so let's start the brainstorm with things that contribute to your job satisfaction. Anybody? Tim. Go ahead, Tim first.
Recognition of achievement.
Recognition of achievement. So you would like to mentor? Okay.
You learn from them, they learn from you.
Okay. Let's stop our brainstorming there, unless somebody feels that their 1, 2, or 3 choice is not already up here. So take your dots, and before everybody makes a mass exodus up to the board, I'd like you to think about which are your top 3, have those chosen first, and then go up to the board and place a dot next to your 1, and then a dot next to number 2, and a dot next to number 3. The only rules are you cannot vote for one thing multiple times. You actually have to distribute your dots among 3 choices so that we can get a flavor for that. So just
and ideally you should choose in advance rather than watching the polls ahead of time.
So we're just going to give you 30 seconds to get comfortable with your own thoughts about that, and then we'll have people start marching up to the board. Very good. So 30 seconds have passed. So just start going up and placing your dots. Remember, 1 dot to 1 item. Yes, you can only use 3 dots even though your strips have 4 or more. It's a mismatch between the commodity of the dots and the nature of the exercise. So you get 1 left over that you can put on your nose or your forehead or something like that. Okay, so let's take a look at how your preferences fell out as a class while I'm blinded by the projector. So your top choice, although it was a little bit of a tie, we had intellectual challenge as number 1, personal contribution and making a difference as a close second, and even a close third is having good colleagues to work with. Notice a couple of outliers. So so pay is coming up here as number 8. So as 8 votes, number 4. So that's still important, but it didn't quite make our top 3. Interesting to note. I'd like to compare your answers to some data we have from a survey that was actually done by Boeing. They do this every year and ask about the components of a person's job that are important to their job satisfaction. And we see a lot of similar results. What I'd like to start pointing out is that things in this side have a low correlation with job satisfaction, and things on this side of the chart have a higher correlation with job satisfaction. So notice that pay is down here, sort of lowest among the respondents of the survey who filled this out. And while it's not quite as low as our ranking of pay here, I think some of these other issues that we found are also ahead of pay in ours as well as in there. So some of the top ones, they're involved in decisions. You might think about that as making a difference. They're encouraged to come up with new and better ways, make good use of the skills. They get recognition for doing a job well done. The conditions allow me to be productive, and they have opportunities to improve their skills. These are all the things that came up as the key drivers to job satisfactions, which is contrary to what a lot of people think, which is, well, if I just get paid a lot, that's a great job and I'm going to be really happy. So what really makes a worker happy then? We have 2 different schools of thought that have emerged over time. So our first one was proposed back in the 1920s. A happy worker is a productive worker. That was a school of thought. So if you believe that a happy worker led to a productive worker, what would your strategy be as a manager? Make people happy, right? So arose the culture of a lot of human resource departments and the focus on trying to keep workers happy in the hopes that that would make them productive. Now, in this day and age, around 2000, we really have a somewhat similar but reflexive take on that a productive worker is really a happy worker, and this is where lean comes from. Work on productivity, work on making people able to contribute and make a difference, and then the result is happiness. But either way that you look at it, this is really a very virtuous circle. There's some link between happiness and productivity, and regardless of which way the causality goes, if we are working towards both of those, we're having a good team. So I want to take a couple charts to show you some research and quantitative examples that link employee productivity to employee happiness. And I'm going to use a case of Southwest Airlines, and there was a wonderful case study that was done on this by Professor Jody Hoffer-Gattel, who actually did her PhD work here at MIT, and she's now at Brandeis University on the faculty there. Just to give you a basic overview of Southwest Airlines, they're known in the industry for having made a profit every year since it started operation, even in some of the down times. You can see here the industry average profit is in the red. This axis, which doesn't show up well on the screen here in gray, is the balance between unprofitable and profitable. Southwest is in the blue. Lots of people have looked towards Southwest as a great example. Certainly everyone in the airline industry looks at Southwest and what they're doing and how they can improve from some of their examples. So Southwest has had a great safety record, only 1 fatality in 35 years of operation. They fly only 1 make of aircraft. These are Boeing 737s. So as you now know from a lot of your lean training, this is going to greatly simplify all their training procedures, their maintenance, their logistics on their fleet. Compare that with an airline that operates a mixed fleet. They have never had a layoff of employees to reduce their costs, including after the 9/11 downturn in this industry. They are the most highly unionized major U.S. airline, which is counter to what people think intuitively. I can actually give you some figures on unionization. As of the writing of this, we had Southwest at 84% unionized, US Air at around 83, United around 81, and then people drop off from there. So it's not that it's a non-union airline. Southwest Airlines also has point-to-point service and not hub and spoke in terms of a route structure. And the thing to note about this is that actually point-to-point route structures tend to be less profitable business models than hub and spoke business models. So already Southwest is a little bit at a disadvantage in terms of revenues because they're not generating as many revenues, but yet they maintain great profits. They consistently offer you some of the lowest fares in this industry. They're a favorite of both investors and employees alike. Investors judged by the stock price of this airline and the capitalization. So what is it exactly that makes Southwest so successful? Now, Professor Hoffer-Gattel argues in her book, The Southwest Airlines Way, that it's really a function of their organizational competency and their ability to build and sustain high-performance relationships. And those are characterized by shared goals, shared knowledge, and mutual respect. She introduces a concept called relational coordination. And she says there are three components of relational coordination. One is shared goals, and these align employees to prioritize the success of the organization over their individual success, over just doing their job. And the shared goals for Southwest are safety, satisfied customers, and on-time departure. It's very simple. Second aspect of relational coordination is shared knowledge. This enables visibility across all the different work processes. And at Southwest, the functional groups actually help each other. There's no issues with, well, this is my job and that's your job, and I'm not going to do your job because it's not my job. Everybody helps out and handles everything. Third element in relational coordination is mutual respect. And this helps reduce barriers between people, employees and groups of employees. And Southwest treats each employee group as just important as any other. And if you understand a little bit about airlines, you may have heard about the pilots union and the flight attendants union and the mechanics union and the shareholders and the managers. It's an organization, it's an industry that's often talked about in terms of groups of employees always arguing for the best interests of their group. And Southwest treats its employees as they're all important. And we have to keep in mind that relational coordination, these three elements of shared goal, shared knowledge, and mutual respect, cannot be achieved without effective communication among all the people participating in the enterprise. And Southwest encourages their employees to do this by communicating about the problem itself rather than thinking about assigning blame. Another way to think about this is let's talk about the problems and not the people. Separate out the people from whatever is happening that's giving us some troubles. And we want to remind you that this kind of open and honest communication, and we heard a flavor of this talked about at the New Balance tour in terms of having meetings try to be productive. Working towards effective communications is really a hallmark of lean thinking organizations. So we've talked about relational coordination. Sounds good, but does it actually do a lot for my enterprise in terms of productivity? And can I see that, or can I start to prove that? So what Dr. Hoffer-Gattel did was she surveyed a number of different airlines and produced this graph to summarize some of the results. What you see on the x-axis is a measure of performance for an airline, which is a combination of a lot of different factors rolled into one. And what you see on the y-axis, which has gotten a little bit messed up in translation here, is a measure of relational coordination that is achieved. And each of these dots represents a different airline and a different facility in different locations around the country. So there's Southwest and a bunch of other airlines scattered in here. And what you see is that Southwest, which has a pretty high relational coordination, is also doing very well on their performance index. So we might assume then that the relational coordination and improving that will result in increased performance. And that was for airlines, but what about other industries? So she did the same study for hospitals and saw very much the same result. So as you increase on your performance in relational coordination, you tend to increase in your productivity performance as well. So does this actually move beyond airlines and hospitals? I don't have data for you on that, but I'll suggest that this kind of relational coordination is a big issue in all kinds of other work settings where there are certain characteristics. One of task interdependence, where there's a lot of handoffs or codependence between items. They may involve feedback and iterations, like a design cycle. Where there's a lot of uncertainty, and there may be a lot of adjusting of plans that have to happen, so a lot of communication is necessary. Or places where there's a lot of time constraints, and so buffers for working out the relational issues just wouldn't exist. So some of the example work settings where this might actually apply, we think product development, lots of team coordination, certainly lots of feedback and iteration, and lots of uncertainty as you go forward with the design. We saw production in our Lego simulation. Operations will be the same, and you can probably think of a lot of others. It's probably easier to think of settings where this would apply, being engineers and how much we work in teams, than in settings where this wouldn't apply. Yeah, Earl.
You know, for this group, one of the things this department does is encourage a lot of teamwork and study groups and things like that. You know, that's another workplace activity where this type of thing will come in.
Absolutely. It's a type of workplace activity where this comes into play, and it's also partly the reason why we encourage a lot of this work in our AeroAstro undergraduate curriculum, because it's going to be very important when you go to take jobs. So in studying Southwest a little bit further, Dr. Hoffager-Tell looked at these outcomes in terms of the performance, in terms of quality and efficiency for airlines, and she looked at some of the practices that Southwest Airlines had for achieving that, and she grouped them into these 10 categories, and I'm not going to go into detail on any one of them, but should you be interested, you can pick up her book and get some more information on that. But it's important to understand that this is not a menu of things that you're going to choose from. These are 10 practices that all must exist to enable effective relational coordination to gain your outcome. So if you have good relational coordination, what else does that get you? Leads you to higher reliability, better customer satisfaction, shorter turnaround time, all of these things very good for an airline. And when you have workforce productivity, you're going to get more revenue from more satisfied customers who keep coming back. If you have a smaller turnaround time, you're going to have airplanes more in the air and earning money for you. Value-added time as opposed to non-value-added time, to put this in a lean context. You have less employee turnover if you're a happy, productive workforce. You have reduced costs from not having your employees idle because they're productive, and you, in the end, have happy, satisfied employees, which are productive employees, which are happy employees. So we've established this link between worker motivation and attitudes and enterprise productivity. So how does this all apply to you here today? And we're going to talk about how you can improve the effectiveness of people operating in a team environment and improving their process. And there's two elements that we're going to talk about. The first is what goes on in a leadership role to facilitate teams being effective. And we'll talk about leadership and management. And the second aspect we're going to talk about is teamwork, being able to work effectively and collaborate in groups of people. And you're going to find over the course of your career, and sometimes from day to day or even hour to hour, you will be switching between all of these various roles. And in one circumstance, you may be leading a team. At the next meeting, you may be working as part of the team, and you may also find yourself responsible as a manager for a particular project. So these roles are going to be ones that keep coming up over the course of your career. And for reasons we're going to discuss soon, you're actually going to be taking on a lot of these responsibilities earlier than engineers who were maybe in this industry a couple of decades ago. So these kind of skills are very important. As we said when we started out here, people are key to Lean. If the people don't want to do it, Lean's not going to be successful. People are really at the heart of this enterprise. The enterprise is all about people. We have organizational structures. They exist to enable people. We have processes, which tell us how people work. And we have tasks, which is what people do. So if you had an assembly plant without people, if you had a business that did not have people in it, would they actually be able to produce something, to deliver value, to make a profit? Absolutely not. And that's why human resources are talked about as the most important resource on any project. Let's talk for a minute to distinguish leadership from management. Both are very necessary, and you're probably going to have to do both of these things over the course of your career. You can summarize leadership in a catchphrase as doing the right thing, and you can contrast that with management, which is once you've selected the right thing to do, management is understanding how to do that thing right. So a leader will focus on the organization and the people within the organization, talking about vision and values and engaging them and empowering them and making change. A management focus will look at goal attainment. So we're talking decision making, how we're going to structure an organization, what we need for human resources, how we manage conflicts, and how we get the other kind of resources, fiscal, technological, that we're going to need. You need both leadership and management in order to effectively motivate a team and get them productive and engaged in their task. I want to step back in history a little bit and talk about how organizational charts and structures have evolved in the aerospace industry. Back from the 60s, we started with matrix organizations, and I'm sure that many of you have heard this terminology before. It's usually represented in this manner, and we think about functions going down the vertical here and programs that might utilize people from each of those functions going across the horizontal. And so a worker would kind of sit here at the intersection of a program and a function, and they would have two bosses. They would have their functional boss, so maybe they're in structures or propulsion or thermal, and then they would have their program manager, who was a second boss for them. And this matrix organization arose because technologies were changing so quickly that the programs wanted to be able to draw on the expertise from all the different engineering departments. And they thought that this would allow them to respond more agilely to the kind of situation they found for their products. Now, as we change some of the situations we find ourselves in aerospace, where it's not necessarily about the change of the technology. We may be refining our processes, we may be driving down costs, we may be responding to different needs. We are moving towards a different structure. We call it the integrated product and process teams. Now, one of the challenges of this matrix organization, if you sat here, if you wanted to talk to somebody here, you don't have any direct link through those. So you go to one of your bosses or to another boss, or gosh forbid, to both or a third before you get down to talk to the person you really need to. So there's a lot of filtering of information and ineffective communications. One of the things that the IPPT has successfully done is that it now lets communication happen at the level where work is being done. It drives down this communications to where it's most effective. Now you don't have filters on all of the talking that's going on and the coordination. Now notice, as a result of this new structure, people who are in integrated product teams have to be responsible for a lot more managing and leading than they were doing in a matrix organization, where you sat in the organization and you had not just one but two bosses, or maybe more if you worked for several programs. Now here you are working in lower level teams that are really tackling different problems, and you all are providing your own leadership and management and guidance for that. So if you are now responsible for doing a lot more in terms of leading and managing, it makes sense that companies are putting more resources towards developing your skills in that area. Companies are offering training. They're valuing experiences like this in school. We're able to develop some of those characteristics. And just to give you some examples, from company literature that talk about this. This is from Boeing Air Force Systems Employee Involvement Strategy. They produce whole documents to try to help you understand how to be an effective team player, leader, and manager. And I'm not going to spend time talking about these, but more to show you that this is very important, that people spend a lot of time thinking about this and putting together strategies for helping their employees to do this effectively. They'll talk about team behaviors by stages of how teams develop. So teams will start in kind of a forming stage, and it takes a while for them to ramp up to become truly high-performing teams. And they exhibit different behaviors and characteristics. And you can also talk about leadership in those very same stages and help you understand how to transition and grow your leadership capabilities. So what I'd like to do now is engage in another active learning exercise. We call this personal values. It's going to run like this. We're going to give you 5 minutes to take that list of personal values and grade them. First, you're going to grade them A, B, or C, most important, important, or least important. And then we want you to rank those values using your grade as a first sort. All right, so you have 5 minutes. Go ahead and rank your own personal values, please. Those people who actually finished the exercise, please raise your hand. I actually didn't finish it the first time I did it. Who finished it within 5 minutes? Raise your hands. Okay, so about half the class. All right, just keep that in mind. We're going to talk about it at the end of the exercise. Your next task is by tables. We've handed out a manila envelope there. Inside are cutouts of the values to help you to use in creating a team list of ranked values. So you did this on the personal level, and now we want you to do it on the team level. So you may find these cutouts helpful because you can move them around. You don't have to worry about writing them down and scratching them out. So you have 10 minutes to complete this task. Ready, go. So at 2:40 we'll stop. And we want a rank list from 1 to N. No ties. Okay, time is up. Please stop working on your task. All right, just wherever you are, please stop your work. And I need your groups to elect one representative to debrief us. All right, so I'm looking for each group to give us a 2-minute debrief. In that debrief, I'd like to hear first your process for going about your task, and then I'd like to hear about the result. And which group would like to start us off? Volunteers? All right, go ahead, Zoe.
Okay, so our process, because we decided that since they were our own personal values, in 2 minutes we probably couldn't actually agree on anything. So we averaged all our numbers to get our list, based on the lowest one being the lowest of our average being our highest. And what we found is what that did is if there were some points of disagreement, like we had a couple where there was someone had a 1 and someone had 18, that automatically pushes out of the ones that we're really considering for the top. So our top 3 people seemed to be pretty happy with overall, and they were a sense of accomplishment, true friendship, and mature life.
Excellent. Okay, great. That's a good template for the rest of the groups to follow. So let's get the other debriefs. Who'd like to go next? Maybe you guys? Go back. Who's your spokesperson? What was your process?
We argued a lot.
That's a process.
Well, I think that people kind of had we kind of had groups of things that belonged at the top, middle, and bottom, and so within those we just had some argument about how to place things. But it actually came to some agreement-ish. And so our top 3 were happiness, inner harmony, and a comfortable life.
And how did you arrive at your first 3 groupings? People just throw in concepts?
At the top 3.
No, you had 3 initial groups and then you sorted within those groups? How did you get to that first cut?
I guess mentally everybody had their sort of A, B, and C groups, so that's how we picked.
And was there a lot of consensus on which were A's, which were B's, which were C's?
Yeah.
In general. Okay. And how about this group next? Because I know you guys have been done for a while and have a lot of time to think about presenting it.
I guess we actually had a similar method. We all decided that we wanted at the top of our list our top 3 choices for all of us, we would have them towards the top of our list. And so from the middle and the last part, we knew that there was going to be a little bit of discussion, and so we were more flexible on what was going to go in each category. We all had more or less a similar mindset on what each of our values were, so our list came out pretty easy.
And what were your top 3?
Our top 3 were happiness, family security, and true friendship.
So were you satisfied with your process? So there's a lot of mathematical averaging for something that's very unmathematical, like personal values. Go ahead, Tim.
There are a number of them that you can all kind of agree on, like, yeah, those are probably pretty important to all of us, but then there are certain ones where it's surprising where some people rank it 1 or 2 and other people rank it 17 or 18. And there's just absolutely no way to reconcile that. Like, you could just argue all day. So for cases like that, you know, okay, we'll just take the average. That's how we justified it to ourselves.
Can I get Mark have comments on
I
that?
don't even think people can come to an agreement on what these things mean either. So you're like not even
That's
talking
true.
about the same thing.
Right. That's true. I think we definitely had disagreement, I think, on what inner harmony really means. So I don't know.
Some of the words on the sheet didn't do it for you.
Yeah,
Can
but
you
I-
explain the concept of inner harmony?
Well, I mean, what it really means to you. But I think any process you choose is going to be arbitrary, so you might as well be systematic. I think that's kind of what we came to.
Okay.
So.
Let's turn now from a discussion of the process you used to discussion of how the topic you were using, you were dealing with, this ranking of values, and how emotions might have gotten into play. Because values are a pretty emotional thing. Your personal values, they are very closely held. Did those get in the way of getting your task done? Did you feel less satisfied with your task and your process because of the material you were dealing with and the task you were dealing with? Not just to you, this is to every group. You all did the same tasks. And you all went about it ranking it either democratically or very mathematically. You somehow came to a consensus about a subject that a lot of people would consider as pretty sensitive, you know, how you personally feel about it. So were there any cases where your own personal feelings or emotions, you felt like that was coming to a head? Go ahead and be honest. Zoe.
I think it's interesting for this exercise how we have like some definitely communal values and some definitely personal values, and I'm not totally comfortable with, first of all, putting those together, and second of all, discussing them in the same ranking, because I don't think it really matters whether you have compatibility in a group of people with your personal values, as long as they actually are personal values and people believe that, but it would reduce the list and maybe be more interesting to try it actually, because since we have a whole society structure, we kind of have to make decisions about values, which are things that you can't normally discuss, but it's important to have the communal ones going.
So I'm not hearing a lot of stories about people getting emotional during this process, and that's wonderful. Wait, I think so. There's laughing. Is that it?
Pleasure laughs.
Critical of your
I'm not accused.
Sorry.
So does that laughter indicate that there was some emotional conflict going on during the test? Let me tell you that this might be an oddity in terms of how this exercise usually turns out, because we normally get a lot of very oftentimes visceral discussion about these emotions and ranking them, because it really does touch on the heartstrings of a lot of people. When I first went through this exercise, I remember it like it was yesterday. We couldn't have had 6 more opposite people sitting at my table, and there was no way that we were going to agree on our values. And being professionals with some age behind us, some more, some less, we were all very strongly rooted in our individual values and did not want to come to any kind of consensus on that, and lots of emotions flying. So I bring that up because I want to talk about working in teams. Collaborating in teams can be very challenging. I think that if we read down this list here, you all can think to your own teamwork experiences, and I'm sure you'll see instances of each of these in your own experiences, so that you all have different goals and values, personal values that you bring to accomplishing a task that can get in the way. You may not be skilled in what you're trying to do, but yet you're working on a team. People can get defensive about their work, and egos get in the way, and a lot of pride of ownership, that can get in the way of working in teams. Preconceived notions which might not fit with your end objective or your process. Then we have different work styles too. And you may find yourself sitting in each of these different camps at different times for different projects that you're assigned to do. Sometimes you feel like, oh, I just really want to do this myself. Sometimes you think, oh, it's just too much work to collaborate with everybody else. I'll just do it on my own. And some people just would really like to take the lead and have themselves do all the work for other reasons. And you've probably seen instances of these in the people you worked with. So there's all kinds of different styles coming together and trying to work. And maybe you had a previous unsuccessful collaboration, which then impacts your desire to work in teams. But some of the benefits are that you get more ideas, and you get new ideas that you haven't had before. You get people with lots of backgrounds and expertise. You can share that workload and balance it in a lean environment. You'll have stronger problem-solving skills by bringing together a diverse set of viewpoints, and this really improves design work, which benefits from the variety and diversity of those opinions. Now, in order to collaborate, there's really 3 elements that go into that. One of them is a task, which is what you're doing together. So for this exercise, that was ranking all the personal values as a group. The second element is process, which is how you're going to do that, which each group actually settled on a process very nicely and thought about that explicitly up front. Your process has got to talk about how you're going to schedule work, coordinate things, break it up, manage time, and all that. But then there's this thing that we call affect. These are the people's feelings about the work that they're doing. And this can be based on prior experiences or culture or biases, their personal values, or their current experience and what's going on. So looking at this exercise we just finished on personal values, sometimes when we do this with groups of people, we see this affect component getting in the way of being able to do a process correctly and accomplishing a task, because people have such strong feelings about their work. So affect and process are really there to support the goal that you're doing this task. How are some of the challenges that you encounter in collaboration? How can we try to meet those? So here are 5 ideas for you to think about and practice in your own teamwork every day. Try to elaborate some of your key thinking in writing as well as verbally. Different modes of communication actually elicit different degrees of understanding from the people that you're working with. Having things written down in multiple ways, in multiple mediums, can be very effective. Make sure that you consider alternate ideas and solutions and try not to jump to consensus prematurely. Usually results in a better product to explore the whole design space that you might have than jumping into one solution. You want to pay careful attention to your process, especially if you think people's feelings, the affect part of what goes into collaboration, might be getting in the way. You want to always constructively encounter problems and disagreements and do that directly and explicitly. We heard people talk about that at New Balance. We've talked about that in this course as being a key component of Lean, to be able to talk about problems and to do it in a productive manner. And lastly, give positive feedback directly and explicitly. So if a job is done well, make sure that you say that and take the chance to recognize it. That'll boost the team. So just to wrap up and convey those 2 messages to you, people really are at the heart of Lean, and the Lean process just cannot work if the people who are doing the process do not believe in it. And 2, each of you are going to be in a position at some time or other, likely very soon, to affect how a team operates and how processes and tasks get done. And this kind of knowledge that you're getting here in the people module will help you in meeting that challenge. So we have leadership, shared goals, shared knowledge, mutual respect, communication, and teamwork as some of our key people elements. So with that, I think we'll finish up with the module, Earl, 5 minutes early. But this does leave time for questions and discussion if anybody wants to raise any issues.
A few weeks ago, I was out at Boeing in Seattle, and we went through an area in the shop, and it actually was a group of people, hourly employees, who had no supervisor. They went ahead and they set up all their work and their schedules, and they've been doing it for like 3 years now. I think that's great.
You
Because
know,
they had the ownership.
We
and-
took the ASU MIT lean group through the Apache plant in Mesa, and we have what they call high performance work organization, the C-17 Apache. For 4 or 5 years, those people do not operate with a supervisor. They set their own cost goals, schedule goals, and quality goals,
Right.
and they literally get, this is hourly people, the equivalent of incentive compensation for beating those goals. And the folks, and those are high performance work organizations, and they meet the goals and beat them, and it's an amazing operation.
That's what these
And
guys
it's
are doing.
all employee involvement.
And they're developing, like you said, the goals and objectives, and they're doing it. And there's no supervision. Now, what an inverse. Usually laying off people at the bottom and keeping all the top. Nope.
It does make a difference whether it's union or non-union.
No. And it was interesting talking to those folks too, because you could see the excitement,
Yeah.
true
They're
excitement.
proud. They're proud.
Yeah.
So Ida, while you're here,
Yes.
can I ask you, someone who has their, feet on the front lines here, what are some of the changes you see at Pratt and Whitney, as it goes through this lean ACE change in the people area? I mean, contrasting when you started and what you see now.
Well, you
these,
still-
some of these students are going to be, one or more of these may be hired by your organization before long. What kind of environment are they going to be walking into?
You'll always have some of the naysayers, but over time I've seen more and more people getting engaged in ACE and really truly embracing it. And you can actually walk out into the shop areas and the hourly folks and the salary people and the management folks are talking it. So you actually see it where it's starting to really take a, people really getting engaged. And not only at Pratt and Whitney, United Technologies, the sun never sets throughout the world. We're always somewhere. We're, England, China, anywhere. And so you get to see it going through all the corporation.
So that
And it's
embraces a
getting
lot of
better.
cultural differences too then.
Yes. Oh, yes. But it's interesting though, because we have some facilities in Singapore. Man, they are just taking off. Absolutely taking off. I don't know if it's because they are, excited about working for a company or what the difference is, but they seem to really embrace it and take off. And you see them all engaged and they're so excited about it. Because we've had a lot of our Singapore, some other facilities actually get it, do it, and move on.
Well, since we have one more minute left, I'd actually like to ask you to take one of the index cards that I put on the center of your tables, and I'd like each of you to write down on there what the most important thing is that you learned from this module, and then if you can just put that up here on the podium, because I'd like to see what messages you all took away from it. And after you're done with that, we'll take a 15-minute break.